Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to your Alaska weather tonight. Tonight is April 27th, Thursday night, 2017. I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenweller from the National Weather Service here in Anchorage. And as always, you can keep up to date with us at our info line, 1-800-472-0391. Our website for the entire region is weather.gov/Alaska. And if you need to email us for any reason, feedback or otherwise, nws.ar stands for Alaska Region, .tvweather@noaa.gov, and Mr. Snider will be prompt in getting back with you. So let's take a look at our breakup map. Now, one thing to note, this is actually an analysis for today, not a forecast for tomorrow, so that date should actually read April 27th. And as you can see here, let me slide over to where you can look at the legend a little bit better. We do have some open areas. Some spots are starting to open up here along the Kuskokwim near Stony. The ice has started to go out there. And for the most part, it's just a mush out breakup scenario, so things are gradually mushing out, not a lot of movement yet. Probably the most movement is in the western Susitna along the Squentna and Yentna rivers, and then we do also have some movement up along the Tanana River, but again, for the most part, it's a normal threat risk with a mush out type breakup. So pretty benign at this point, but we are monitoring it, and all our folks in the River Forecast Center are keeping a close eye on things across the river regions as we do reach that time of year. Let's take a look at our satellite map now. As you can see here, we do have a couple different circulations to talk about. One weak circulation out over the Bering, starting to fall apart here. Another circulation that is down by southeast Alaska, and this one's been fairly tightly wound and fairly strong, but is quickly weakening as it moves onshore and off into western Canada. And then our last one, I'll loop it again so you can see the front edge of our next, what we call a cirrus shield. This is all high cirrus, which is why it's almost hard to detect from the satellite, or at least on this image, and that's really cold cloud tops ahead of a strong frontal system. It will not make it very far to the west before it starts to lose its strength. Let's take a look at the visible loop now, and you can see a little bit better out over south central and over parts of the interior. There have been some spotty showers developing along the mountains, especially over the Kenai Peninsula. Radar this afternoon down in Kenai showed a pretty active cells moving off the mountains and towards the Cook Inlet, so possibility for some heavy downpours on your way home. There were a few reports of small hail or graupel, as we call it, about a pea size, and that was from yesterday afternoon. Similar setup to today, so places that had some sun earlier, likely to see those type of showers once again. Let's take a look at the loop one more time. Some fog up along the Arctic coast here with just stable conditions, some warm air over the colder waters. And then again, those showers across much of southern Alaska, out over southwest Alaska as well, and some showers down here into the Gulf. So looking at the surface map now from the satellite image there, you can see that rain moving on to the southeast portion of the state into the Panhandle. And those gusty winds, again, gale force winds over the marine zones should be tapering off rather quickly this afternoon into the evening hours. And the area of low pressure is right here in the northern portion of the Gulf, and that will quickly move off into western Canada. For south central there, you can see those showers along the Kenai Peninsula. They again were drifting from east to west, and this is more or less what we call a thermal trough here. Kind of early in the season to see this feature, but because we have been relatively warm, it has set up so we're a little bit warmer over the land than we are over the water, and thus we get a little bit of lower pressure inland, and that helps to get those showers firing along, especially along terrain, but it can be anywhere, and then they just drift out in places like Anchorage or Talkeetna. They drift off the terrain and out over the population centers. Again, there's that fog up along the Arctic coastline there and stretching all the way down. Even Tin City and Point Lay were reporting some light snow this afternoon, so some snow being able to fall out of that. And then our weak area of low pressure on the western side of the thermal trough. There's our other low that we mentioned on the first satellite loop, and you can see there's just some showers along the Alaska Peninsula. And then our big weather maker for the Bering portion of the state out here at 973 millibars. Some snow on the front edge of that, but really this is a warm system, so we're looking for mostly rain as soon as that front does move through. Taking a look at tonight's forecast, not going to see a whole lot of change to this pattern anytime real soon. Probably the biggest change for you folks in southeast will be that the light rain and the strong winds do move onshore, and we see those winds die off pretty quickly tonight as high pressure, this North American ridge, tries to push up into southeast Alaska, which should help those winds to subside. The rain will continue though with onshore flow, and there's that area of low pressure as it moves off into western Canada at 1,013 millibars, kind of joining up with that thermal trough that we talked about. And there again for tonight, the thermal trough, a little bit less activity in the way of showers tonight as we lose some of that daytime heating during the afternoons. That's when the best chance for those showers is. So we lose some of that heating, expect the showers to slowly taper off in the evening hours. Slightly cooler, so we're expecting some snow showers associated with this low just north of Bethel and south of the Seward Peninsula, and then again that fog along the Arctic coast. Our low down over the AKwx is starting to weaken, and just some showers there, mainly over the North Pacific, a few coming up from the south to the north, so hitting the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Our low out over the Bering down to 970 millibars, and again mostly warm air and rain associated with this, some moderate, possibly even heavy rain for places like Shimei and Attu, and we do have some gale warnings posted with that storm. On into Friday now, you can see again not a whole lot of change anytime real soon. We do have those light showers starting to weaken and taper off out over the southeastern portion of the state there, and winds should again be coming down pretty markedly by Friday afternoon for you mariners out there. Our thermal trough and associated low will be again stretched out right along the Alaska range down into southwest Alaska near the Killbuck range there. And with that, we expect afternoon showers to once again form. Higher elevations could see some snow mix in, certainly still late April, so cold air still up in the higher elevations. And then again, that fog along the west coast starts to get out of the picture for the Arctic coast, but still seeing it hanging on here with these isobars, a lot of distance between them, which means the flow is very weak, not much at all to speak of in the way of pushing things as far as fog, pushing it out of the area. So fog will linger along Cape Lisburne and Point Lay. And there's our frontal system starting to make its way eastward. Again, more rain, wind, and warm air coming in. Taking a look at southeast now on into the weekend and Saturday here, we can start to see things drying out as this area of low pressure works its way quickly from south to north. And so starting to wrap in some drier air coming in for the northern portion of the Panhandle. However, for the southern portion of the Panhandle, it's going to be quite wet and quite windy as this low will be fairly compact and bring quite a surge of moisture into those areas. So we will be watching this feature. Models have not completely locked on to exactly where this is going to track, but right now it looks like the southern Panhandle will be in the main target there. High pressure tries to build in over south central Alaska, but it's not strong enough to stop the showers. So once again, another afternoon of mountain showers, and that really will be the story across much of the southern portion of the state. Higher elevations again, and farther to the north, a little bit of snow mixing in there. Pretty nice weekend setting up for the Arctic coastline and north of the Brooks Range. Pretty calm conditions, just some cloud cover. And again, our frontal system continuing to make its trek to the east, starting to impact the Alaska Peninsula now with rain, south to southeast winds, and again, a surge of warm air. On the backside, we do expect another round of showers as another frontal trough sets up and starts to push in some more instability into the western Aleutians. How about our temperatures this afternoon as of 4 p.m.? Mainly in the mid-40s, even some low 50s down into southeast Alaska. We did see 50 up there near White Pass. And then 46 degrees in Valdez with 50 at Gulkana, 53 again along Talkeetna. So there's that thermal trough that you can see where those lower 50s are stretched out. As we look up towards the interior portion of the state, we saw about 49 degrees there in Fairbanks and generally around 30 degrees for the northern portion of the Yukon. And then along the Brooks Range in the upper 20s, and finally single digits for our 4 p.m. temperatures up towards the northern portion of the state. Down into southwest Alaska now, you can see Bethel came in at 44 degrees. And for those that are watching out there, the radar continues to be out, and we are still working on some maintenance features for getting that thing back up and running. Out towards Dillingham and King Salmon in the mid to upper 40s. And then as you stretch out along the Alaska Peninsula, generally mid 40s, and then lower 40s out towards Dutch Harbor, 38 and 39 respectively for St. Paul and St. George. Let's see if we can get to our next slide here for our high temperatures tomorrow. On Friday, we're looking for generally low 50s for the most part across southeast Alaska. South central and southwest Alaska, we'll see generally low 50s to upper 40s in parts of the southwest interior. Along the Tanana Valley, we see generally mid to 40s to low 50s. And then along the Brooks Range and stretching north to the Arctic coastline, anywhere from your upper 20s to your single digits there near Barrow and the Arctic coast. For southwest and the Alaska Peninsula, generally upper 40s and low 50s. Taking a look at our flying weather now for the tomorrow morning's forecast, you do see some of those IFR conditions associated with that fog and lower clouds along the west coast. Here's the IFR conditions associated with that frontal system, again bringing some heavier rain and certainly some lower ceilings and gusty winds out to the western Aleutians. Just a few pockets here of IFR conditions along the south side of the Alaska Peninsula as that southerly flow helps to push the moisture in there. And then looking out towards southeast Alaska, just up towards Yakutat, we do see some IFR conditions, but generally MVFR conditions throughout much of southeast with that continued onshore moisture push. Up along the Arctic coast, there's where that fog will help to reduce visibilities to the instrument flight rules, and just a little bit there in those fog and snow showers up near the Capes. And then taking a look at tomorrow afternoon, we do see improving conditions for much of southeast Alaska, getting rid of most of the IFR, just still a few spots near Yakutat and the higher elevations. Generally across the southern portion of the state, we'll see patchy MVFR. The interior and northern portion of the state looking VFR at this time. And then our IFR, again, along the west coast with just that weak flow and helping to keep some of the moisture embedded in there. And then IFR conditions along our frontal system way out over the western Aleutians. MVFR conditions will be predominant along the coastline up to the north. Taking a look at our passes then, Enitovik Pass is going to be VFR tomorrow. And Adigan Pass also VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill will both be MVFR throughout the day. Rainy Pass will be marginal flight rules. Windy also marginal. We're looking for Isabel to be marginal as well. And Mantassa should start out marginal, but should slowly improve to VFR as we do see a little bit of high pressure working in here. Tanita will be MVFR, becoming visual flight rules. And looking from Portage to go from MVFR to instrument flight rules as some lower ceilings start to move into the Portage Valley. And Chilkoot and White will remain MVFR throughout the day. So how about our freezing levels? Well, again, as we start to get towards May here, we're starting to see that surface line creep a little bit farther to the north and starting to see some of those pockets of warmer air, 4,000 all the way up to 6,000 feet down south of the Aleutian chain. And so we'll continue to see those surface levels start to climb, or the freezing levels start to climb above the surface, but we do still have a chance for some snow and rain-snow mix at the higher elevations, as we are still here in late April. Then into tomorrow for icing now, looking at above 5,000 feet, we do have a small area of occasional to widespread moderate, and that's really just associated with that frontal system out there. As we look towards the eastern portion of the Bering, above 4,000 feet, light to isolated moderate. And then over southwest Alaska, mainly climbing above 6,000 feet from 5,000 feet, but we do drop it down to about 4,000 feet here with a slightly cooler air mass still in place over the Seward Peninsula. All this should be light to isolated moderate, but hard to predict exactly where it will be with these showers. The showers obviously could fire just about anywhere, so that's why we have it fairly broad brushed across much of southwest and up into the eastern portion of the Tanana Valley. Out towards southeast Alaska with that onshore flow, can't rule out some light to isolated moderate above 6,000 feet. So how about our jet stream then? We're taking a look from west to east. It moves at 190 knots, supporting the storm track, and then dives quickly down into the North Pacific. This is a pretty unusual jet pattern this time of the year. It usually moves more west to east in a zonal fashion. This is extremely meridional for the North Pacific. So down at 125 knots, alpha screen, and then back up at 150 knots. Then it would go to more zonal flow at 120 knots into southeast Alaska and the Dixon Entrance, and then starting to move even faster at 160 knots in support of this low pressure out over the lower 48. So again, a pretty active jet pattern, but mostly south of the state, so slow to change, seeing change here in the mainland. Again, a small finger of the jet up towards the northern portion of Canada at about 75 knots. So for our 9,000 foot winds then, we do have our few weak areas of low pressure, one out over the Alaska Peninsula, and then we saw our surface low here just north of the, for the northern portion of the Panhandle. So winds generally flowing around that from southwest, becoming more westerly, and then eventually southerly and southeasterly generally at about 20 to 25 knots. Slightly calmer down here, about 10 knots towards Kodiak Island. Pretty calm across much of the state under the influence of that weak high pressure aloft, and then generally southerly flow along the western portion of the state, 10 to 20 knots. Strongest winds are going to be associated with this area of low pressure here at 9,000 feet. We see anywhere from 65 all the way up to 60 knots. So strong winds and a fairly sharp turn where that frontal system is from the westerly 40 knots becoming southerly at 60. So that's where we're going to be focusing for our area of concerns as far as turbulence go. For 3,000 foot winds, again, there's our area of concern right there where that sharp turn and the stronger winds are between 35 and 50 knots, quickly switching directions. Try to say that a couple times fast. Then we see generally southerly flow across the central bearing, more westerly, becoming southerly as you get towards Kodiak and coming up Cook Inlet into the Copper River Basin, generally south to southeast flow at about 15 knots. Coming around this area of high pressure, the North American high, 25 knots out of the south, becoming southwesterly at about 10 knots as you get off into Canada. And then along the Arctic coastline, more east to west there, 20 to 25 knots north of the high pressure. So taking a look at our turbulence, as you can see, let me slide out of your way, and you can see here along the frontal system below 4,000 feet, some occasional widespread moderate where those stronger turns and stronger winds are, but generally an area along the frontal system of light to isolated moderate, again below 4,000 feet. Stay tuned, we'll be right back with your marine forecast.
Leaping Leo. Welcome to Stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
The constellation of Leo the Lion is riding high in the evening sky right now, and he has some interesting stars with some creative names.
So, fasten your seatbelts for a ride through the sky with Leo the Lion.
Okay, we have our skies set for about an hour after sunset facing southeast. High above the horizon, you'll see Leo casually reclining, just as the ancient Egyptians depicted him in a regal sphinx-like position.
His head and forequarters are formed by a backward question mark, with the bright blue-white star Regulus marking his heart. His rear is marked by a triangle of stars, with Leo's second brightest star, Dehne, marking his tail.
The stars in the head of Leo also form an asterism called the sickle. All the stars are visible to the naked eye, even though they are quite far from us.
The names of the stars, starting at the top of the backwards question mark and working our way down, are Epsilon Leonis, Rosalus, Adafera, Algeba, Eta Leonis, and of course Regulus.
As far as the triangular shape of stars marking the tail, you already know about Dehne. However, the other two stars are Zosma to the northwest of Dehne and Cherton to the south of Zosma.
Within the official boundary of Leo, there are over 90 stars. 5 of those stars are less than 33 light years from Earth. That's kind of close for astronomers. And at least 13 of those stars have planets circling around them.
The brightest stars of Leo are an excellent example of Persian star naming. If you've watched our show over the years, you may have noticed that a lot of stars have Arabic names.
That's because many of the stars were named by Persian astronomers thousands of years ago. The star patterns they saw way back then are similar to what we still call them today. And they often name the stars after the body part that the star represented within the constellation.
For example, the prefix Dehne means tail and Ras means head. Several stars in the sky have either Dehne or Ras as part of their names.
Rosalus, also known as Mu Leonis, is the star at the top of Leo's head. It's 133 light years from Earth, and its name is short for Al-Ras Al-Asad Al-Shamali. When translated, it means the northern star of the lion's head. Wow, that's awful specific.
And on the other end of the lion, Dehne is a blue-white star, and it's 36 light years from Earth. Its name means the lion's tail. Regulus is a blue-white main sequence star with a dimmer secondary companion. Both stars are a little over 77 light years from Earth, and the name Regulus means little king.
Algeba is a binary star system 126 light years from Earth, and its name means the forehead.
Adafera is a white giant star 260 light years from Earth, and its name means the braid, which is in reference to the lion's mane.
In 2014, it was announced that Rossellus has a planetary companion more than twice the mass of Jupiter with a year 358 days long.
The last two stars we'll talk about are near the tail of Leo. Their names are Zosma and Cherton. Zosma is a white star over twice the diameter of our Sun. In ancient Greek, its name means girdle, and this star is 58 light years from Earth.
Cherton is a large star that is more than 2.5 times the mass of our Sun, and its name means two small ribs. Cherton is 141 times brighter than the Sun and is 165 light years away.
Wow, if Cherton were the Sun, we'd be pretty toasty.
Most definitely. So, get outside and check out the brightest stars of Leo the Lion.
We have Rossellus, Odifera, Algeba, and Regulus making parts of his head.
And Zosma, Chertan, and Denebula making his rear end and tail.
He's easy to find when you keep looking up.
And welcome back to your marine forecast. Let's start with our sea ice. And as you can see, our illustrious forecaster, Mary Beth, she analyzed this today. And you can see across much of the Bering Sea, we are slowly seeing it start to mush out and rot in place. Not a lot of change. We do have some northerly winds helping to move some of those larger chunks from north to south. But again, not a lot of strong wind, so not really seeing a major surge to the south or anything. But most of it is just slowly starting to dissolve in place and rot in place. And so that'll probably be the trend through the next several days, as the pattern will be slow to change. On into our marines now for southeast Alaska up towards Lynn Canal. Looking for north winds at 10 knots on Friday afternoon, seas about 2 feet. Looking for north winds 15 knots a little bit farther to the south, seas about 3 feet, and then southeast winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet down towards Dixon Entrance. Out over the open waters, mainly easterly winds all the way up to gale force here over southeastern portions of the outer waters, 35 knots out of the east and 13-foot seas. Slightly lower seas and winds as you start to move north towards Yakutat, 25 knots to 20 knots out of the east, and seas generally between 6 and 10 feet. On into Saturday, let's just step into south central on Friday now. We can see variable winds towards the Prince William Sound at 10 knots variable winds. It seas about 2 feet. Out over the open waters, variable winds 10 knots and seas about 5 feet. Until you get down towards the Barren Islands, a little bit stronger southeasterly winds, 15 knots, seas generally between 4 and 5 feet. And then pretty calm conditions south of Kodiak there, seas at about 5 feet with variable 10 knots. Towards the inner portions of the waters, generally a south to southeast wind, 10 to 20 knots, a little bit stronger towards the western Barren Islands, and seas between 2 and 6 feet. On into Saturday now, you can see primarily a northeast direction here as we start to see that next area of low pressure move into the southeastern portion of the Gulf. And so with that, we generally are going to see the winds move in a counterclockwise fashion around it. So that's why we have the northeast winds and easterly winds, generally between 15 and 25 knots, and seas going to be running about 3 to 5 feet over the inner portions of the passageways and about 2 to 7 feet out over the open waters. On into the Alaska Peninsula for Friday, you can see variable winds north of the peninsula, about 10 knots southeast winds towards Bristol Bay, and then variable 10 knots south of the peninsula as well, except southeast of Chignik, where we expect south winds 15 knots. Seas generally about 6 feet south of the peninsula and 2 feet north of the peninsula. On into Saturday, increasing winds from the south and southeast as we see that frontal system approach from the west. And so with that, winds picking up between 20 and 30 knots and seas climbing all the way up to 12 feet here south of Sandpoint and about 3 to 7 feet north of the peninsula. Out over the Aleutians, generally a southerly wind ahead of that front, and just starting to see that frontal passage tomorrow afternoon out over the western portions of the marine zones. Generally about 20 to 30 knots and slightly higher seas between 9 and 13 feet south of the chain, and a little bit lower, about 6 to 7 feet north of the chain. On to Saturday, that's where we see that frontal system pass through, so that's where our winds shift from south to west, and with that we'll see anywhere between 20 and 30 knots on the speeds, and seas climbing all the way up to 17 feet, even 19 feet there for the western Aleutians, generally about 8 to 10 feet for the portions north of the chain. On into west coast of Alaska for Friday, generally a south to east flow, southeast to east flow, 15 to 25 knots, and seas on the order of about 2 to 4 feet. And then on Saturday, we'll see more easterly winds across the area, 20 to 30 knots, and seas between 4 and 11 feet. And then up towards the Arctic coast, again remaining all in the ice pack as we saw there on the sea ice slide. Generally easterly winds, except if you're north of the Seward Peninsula, and that's where we see some northerly winds, anywhere between 10 and 20 knots. And then on into Saturday, starting to see more easterly winds here north of the Seward Peninsula. Just some weak southerly winds there just off of Cape Lisburne. But again, that general easterly flow as we saw on all the wind fields, 9,000, 3,000, about 15 to 20 knots at the surface there. So let's take a look at our recap for tonight. We have that onshore flow continuing to keep light precipitation into southeast Alaska, but we'll see those winds die down. Those gale warnings should drop off by tonight. Just some isolated showers, possibly mixing with snow over higher elevations for southern Alaska. And then we generally have some light snow showers along the west coast with slightly colder air in place. Fog will continue for the Arctic coastline, dense in some spots down to a quarter mile, and then some light showers for the southern portion of the Alaska Peninsula. And our big frontal system way off to the west will slowly make its way to the east as we go into Friday. There it is, starting to track off to the east, bringing some gale force winds with it into the marine zones. We have another afternoon of showers along the Alaska Range where this thermal trough will be in place, and some patchy fog along the west coast. For southeast Alaska, just some showers as things start to improve there. And then on into Saturday, that next area of low pressure starts to work quickly from south to north, bringing some strong winds and heavier rain to southern portions of the Panhandle, while our front over the western Bering has made its way all the way to the Alaska Peninsula with showers over the mainland. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.